Good afternoon. Call to order Bureau of Public Works regular meeting. I believe we do have a quorum, so we should be able to take care of a couple of action items and a discussion item on our agenda tonight. So with that, we'll start the meeting with the public comments, if there would be any. Anyone wishing to make a public comment at this point in the meeting? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of meeting minutes for July 12th. Need a motion, please? And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing
Aye.
none. Oh, I'm sorry. Did someone abstain? Oh, it was an aye, excuse me. Excuse me.
Aye.
Very good.
Chairman, I'll abstain on that one. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'll abstain.
Okay, thank you. You're recorded, okay, great. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4. This is an action item that we do need to address regarding Anna Grace School in Bloomfield. And who do we have today?
Mike Curley, Manager of Engineering. To answer your questions, I'll just give you a brief description of the project. Back in May of 2021, the Capital Region Education Council installed about 950 linear feet of sanitary sewer. They extended our sewer system from the Griffin Road pump station in Windsor across the border into Bloomfield to serve the school. They successfully finished the project. There are no outstanding claims, and the city and the town has signed off on the pavement restoration on the project. Are there any questions?
We'll see. Any questions from the commissioners on this item? Would you like any more detail from Mr. Curley, excuse me. Very good. We'll take this item and,
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
yes, do we need a motion to even accept? So moved. In a second, move adoption. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Very good. This item is passed. Item number 5. Item number 5, we will have some discussion early to see what's behind this. And we do have a resolution that comes to us for consideration during and just before the vote. So let's see where we are. Who's going to do that presentation?
It's John Myrtle, District Clerk. This agenda item relates to a supplemental assessment that was approved back in 2022. The 50 Morgan Street property in Hartford was the Crown Plaza Hotel, and it's undergoing a conversion to a residential apartment building. The supplemental assessment was for the conversion of a total of 252 apartment units. After the public hearing, BPW levied the assessment, the board approved the assessment. When the bill was sent to the property owner, they effectively disputed it or raised some concerns with it. They had requested through me to bring their concerns to BPW. Attorney Consoli is here to speak on behalf of the property owner. The assessment as levied back in 2022, it followed the proper legal process, followed all the rules, and the assessment is legally justified and proper. But as Attorney Consoli can explain, they're raising some fairness questions because basically there was a prior owner that had begun the conversion of some of the residential units. The current owner had took it over after 96 units had been converted. And now, while the 252 apartment units that was part of the basis of the assessment, that was from the City of Hartford records, and that was the original plan that was submitted and approved through planning and zoning, but their plans have now changed. The city records have been updated to show 214 units. I had sent a draft resolution to the commissioners today, and it's with that 214 units. If BPW were to consider reducing the assessment, that 214 units is what the city records currently show. The property owner has expressed that their plan is a lower number than that at 192 units. It's the 96 that have been converted. They're in the process of doing another 96. So that's some of the history. I know, again, Attorney Consoli is here, Chairman Hoffman. We figured he could speak during this agenda item rather than during public comment.
Very good. Before the questions come up, we'll turn to Attorney Consoli. And you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. For the record, Scott Consoli, Consoli, with Consoli Borto and Law Group, representing the owner of the property, Shelbourne Excella, 50 Morgan Street, Hartford, Connecticut. As John mentioned, the history of the project, we have two basic issues today to discuss. One is the number of units, which I can explain. The second issue I'd like to discuss that also falls into, I would call it the quote, fairness category, is the timing of the assessments. So I'll just give you a little chronological order of the way this transpired. In 2000, historically, I think we agree with MDC, the hotel, the former Crown Plaza, was operating as a 342 room hotel, is I believe the number MDC is carrying. I don't think we dispute that number. In 2017, the then owner of the property filed a building permit to convert a portion of the hotel comprising approximately 186 hotel units into 96 residential units. We agree that that action of converting from hotel rooms to residential does trigger a supplemental assessment. I don't think that's an issue. What is an issue is, first, probably the easiest of the two issues is this supplemental assessment for the total number of units. So in 2017, a building permit was issued. In 2020, the first CO was issued for 96 units. In 2022, a second building permit was issued for another 96 units for a total of 192 units. 192 units is the number of units that the current owner and developer intends to build. Our request today is that the supplemental assessment be modified to reflect 192 units, not what's currently reflected on the assessor's records of 214 units. In consideration of the MDC agreeing to lower that assessment number to 192 units, we would agree to record whatever documentation on the land records MDC desires to confirm that the supplemental assessment is based on 192 units. And if we ever construct more than 192, we'll pay whatever the additional supplemental assessment is at that point in time. But there currently are not any plans to build 214 units, so we request that you lower that amount to the 192 that we intend to build, and in fact, we are underway building now. pursuant to the current building permit issued in 2022. So issue number one is lower the overall supplemental assessment to 192 units. The second issue I'd like to raise is the timing of the assessments. As I mentioned in the beginning, the initial building permit for this project was issued in 2017. In 2019, the then current lender filed a foreclosure, which it completed in 2020. So ownership changed hands. In 2020, the first conversion of 96 units was completed and a CO was issued in 2020 for the first 96 units. No supplemental assessment was issued at the time of the initial building permit. No supplemental assessment was issued at the time of the CO for the original 96 units. Our client purchased the property in June of 2021. At the time that we purchased, there were outstanding fees due MDC. We contacted the MDC, we got final payoff numbers, and I have a check and a cover letter indicating that we paid approximately $28,000 to the MDC at our closing to clear the back fees. At no time, anywhere through that process, 2017, 2020, or 2021, did MDC raise the fact that there was going to be a supplemental assessment in the future. So we as the third-party purchaser had no idea that there was a supplemental assessment that had not already been assessed and paid. In 2022, in January of 2022, is when we, the current owner, obtained our building permit for the next 96 units, January 6th, 2022. 2 weeks later, January 25th, 2022, we got the supplemental assessment letter from the MDC, not only for the 96 units we were constructing, but for 252 units. And when we called and inquired about that supplemental assessment, we were informed that the initial 96 units, there was never a supplemental assessment for those units. So, that puts us as a bona fide purchaser in a precarious position because, 2 years later, we have no recourse against our seller. We do have a title policy that doesn't show any liens for MDC, and so theoretically, we have a potential claim against our title company, but they're not really in the business of covering an after-acquired lien for a prior circumstance. So the two asks for today for your consideration are, one, that you reduce the overall supplemental assessment to 192 units. We'll agree that if we build more than that, a further supplemental assessment would be warranted. We'd like you to consider waiving the supplemental assessment due to passage of time for the original 96 units. And we'd like you to consider that under the category of fairness. I think that technically there's no time bar to you assessing, but I do think that it causes a cloud on title and a potential title predicament given the amount of time that lapsed from the time of the initial building permit to the CO to our acquisition to us asking for an MDC payoff till today. That's all I have.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, do you want to
I just,
respond to that?
well, I think the original approval, it wasn't a function of them getting a building permit. The original approval was for 250, 252. And we had gone back and forth constructively with Attorney Consoli to try to get a handle on exactly what was originally approved and what the city considers to be the approved development. And rather than have him go back or his client go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission and get reapproved for some lower number, we conceded that based upon the assessor's record, and they carry the 214, that the original assessment would be at, or that the assessment should be modified down to the 214 number. The 192 is a function of what the now owner seeks to or wants to build or plans to build. I just want everyone to understand that under the statute that we followed in this case, we have the ability to not just assess what's actually built, but also assess what is approved to be built. And again, that goes back to the 214. I don't necessarily take issue with reducing that to the 192. Obviously, that's up to this board and the full board to consider, because that's their present intent on building. It's a rather unique case, and quite frankly, my understanding from speaking with John was that we were taking all issues into account when we in considering whether to reduce it at all, but to reduce it to the 192, including the issue that Attorney Consoli brought up about the timing of this thing. That being said, if you're inclined to, we have two resolutions here today. One is at the 214, which is the number carried on the assessor's in the assessor's office. We have another draft or version at the 192, which is what Attorney Consoli and his client are, at least in part, are seeking. As to the other issue, one of the things that comes up in these cases is we only can do what we know about, and oftentimes, and it's not Attorney Consoli's client's issue, but oftentimes development happens. We are not made aware of things that are happening. We have tried on many occasions, and it's not the city of Hartford's fault either. We've tried on many occasions to work with all our towns so that where there is this intensification or change of use that calls for higher fees, that we're notified of when those are applied for, certainly not just when if they're granted. So at the zoning level. So as John pointed out, we have hearings on these things, public hearings. This was noticed as it's required to be noticed under the statute. The owner of the property got notice of the proceeding. I don't believe that there was any appeal of the assessment. There was a right to appeal. There's no appeal taken. You get that. But in taking all that into account and the fairness issues that Attorney Consoli pointed out, those are all factors that brought John and I to the conclusion that we could support the 192 with the caveat, as the attorney indicated, if there were development beyond that or units that are constructed beyond that, that they would come back and pay the assessments at the rate at the time. Now, there's some risk involved, right? I mean, who knows what's going to happen with our rates in this respect. So they would pay the rate in effect at the time that the additional units were assessed. And we'd put something on the land records that reflect that, so that the whole world knows that that's a potential should they transfer the property to another owner.
Will they have separate meters for water? Each apartment will have separate meter?
No. And this is a sewer assessment.
Commissioner Drake.
Is there a system in place that notifies us? Obviously, we weren't notified. But is there something that was missed, or is it just not there?
We, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Chris Stone, District Council. We have sent notices to each of our 8-member towns and asking them to keep us advised. And we try to keep track of zoning agendas for this type of thing. We've done a much better job recently on keeping track of that. At the time, there wasn't any formal notice. And I'm not in no way blaming any one of the towns. They have a job to do too, and they're seeking to promote development. I think there's no checklist. There's no checklist. I mean, you can go back to other things too, like in plumbing permits. You know, is there a check off for backwater valve? No. Are they required under? Yes. But, you know, these things happen. It's been better, and all our towns have been better. You'll see some things come up in the next couple meetings that will reflect that. But as of 2000, the system wasn't in place that would have caught this.
Commissioner Drake, that satisfies?
Yeah, well, it is what it is, yep.
Very good. Commissioner Gale?
Yeah, Council Stone, can you walk us through I'm just wondering what the process is for the MDC putting any assessment. When you're, let's say, just talking about building a single-family house somewhere that's not connected, isn't there some sort of a caveat that goes on the land records? And when does the assessment actually get placed?
Yeah, well, if it's a sewer that we're building or that is built by a developer, there's at times there's been a caveats placed on the properties that may ultimately be served by that sewer, and there's a notice of at some point there may be an assessment due. In this case, this is this is an existing structure that was assessed, and we give them credit for the assessment that was placed on the property decades ago as a hotel. And as you see in the calculation, we give them a credit for that particular use and that payment. Under the statute, we're entitled, the statute's permissive, not mandatory, but we may, as a water pollution control authority, place an additional or supplemental assessment on properties that are for change of use. And we have a schedule for the change. We've developed a schedule pursuant to that statute as to what the additional fees would be for changes of uses. Sometimes, obviously, a less intensive use that have already paid an assessment previously, there's no assessment due. But in cases like this, where we're going from a hotel use, which has a certain number of units that at any given time may or may not be used on any given night or week or what have you, to an assessment for apartments or residential dwelling units, we have a different assessment amount that's been approved by this bureau time and time again. That's higher than the assessment as a hotel. And so we go through the process that's set out in the statute that requires a determination of what the proposed assessment would be, a notice to the affected property owners or owner, a hearing before the Bureau of Public Works. You make a determination, and the assessment is billed to the property owner. All that was followed here.
Two questions. Just going back to the example of just a regular house. When is the assessment? When is our assessment leveled? Is it only leveled after there's a CO that the house is actually built?
They seek a connection, and when they seek a connection, they get assessed.
So it's not a function of the CO. It's a function of the connection.
But again, here, it's already been connected. We would have never. They wouldn't.
I understand. I'm just trying to understand how the process works for other people. And then on this particular property, do we know back in time, was there ever any kind of a caveat put on the land records?
I'm not aware of it, John.
For the supplemental assessment, no, caveat would not be placed because.
No, I'm asking about originally,
Assessment?
before the original construction of the hotel.
I don't know, but I believe so, yes,
The
because,
assessment was paid.
yeah, when the initial project would have been approved, the assessment process starts, caveat is filed, and then it's not due and payable until the project is completed. So the purpose of the caveat is that time period in between approval of the project, put notice on the land records for a potential future buyer, and then when the project is done and assessment is due and payable, then a lien would be filed and replace the caveat.
We don't put caveats in situations where you have what might be a supplemental assessment due. Otherwise, we'd place a caveat on every property, because you never know what ultimately, if there might be a change of use going forward. That would be absolutely impossible to do.
Understood. I just wondering in this particular, is it permissible to ask Attorney Consoli the same question? Sure.
If it's to the chair, yes, it's fine by me.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to know whether they in their title search, found a caveat on the land records at the, going back in time.
For the record, yeah, we did not find a caveat in our title search, but I would say that, again, in my experience, if you had filed a caveat, once that got paid, it wouldn't necessarily show in our title search. What we didn't find was any caveat or any notice of this supplemental assessment. We did have notice of other liens, which is why we called MDC to get clearance on those liens. But we did not find any type of caveat in our title search.
Do we have a response, Mr. Attorney?
I mean, that's accurate. When the hotel was built, they were assessed, they paid the assessment, and quite frankly, they probably paid it as they built, after they built it, so there's no need for a caveat about what might be due in the future with a future hotel in the building, so.
And one further point, this is John Myrtle. If, again, there was, I think everyone understands, but there was no caveat for the supplemental assessment. And even if there had been or could have been, the supplemental assessment didn't exist at the time that the current owner bought the property because it came after that fact. So there was no caveat to file because there was no lien, no assessment. It wasn't in existence until 2022, which is after they bought the property.
How did we even find out there was a change of use? Did we read it in the paper? I mean, someone had to call us, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes they call the engineering department to say we need a capacity analysis. Do you have enough water sewer capacity for our development? But sometimes we read it in the paper. And sometimes we're searching, as Chris mentioned, land records, but
If you kept this quiet, you might not have gotten the bill.
Well, the problem was not the problem, but to their credit, which is one of the reasons why both John and I support the reduction, not just from 252 to 214, but to 192, is because they came forward and they paid liens. They paid liens off, right? So.
It's something that has to be fixed, right? I'm just not sure what and how, but.
Well, we continue to develop ways to try to get to the point, including, they post their zoning agendas online. We look at those. We send letters reminding them, and oftentimes, most times it works, sometimes it doesn't. Newspapers, whatever it might be, but it's getting better than certainly it was.
and if I may,
Please.
and
No,
to just
please.
add to that, Scott
Scott.
Jellison, a lot of times this happens a lot. Someone's developing a property. I've got a sewer main. I got a water main. I don't need to talk to the MDC. So, and that happens a lot. They don't understand that this supplemental assessment exists. So it's part of the problem.
Commissioner Gale, you had another.
Just a comment. Since this was apparently driven by the certificate of occupancy, it does strike me that, among other things, perhaps a fairly easy thing is that anytime Hartford or any other one of our towns is issuing a certificate of occupancy, we ought to know about it. It would seem as though that would have been the most appropriate time for this assessment to have then been levied. Certainly, that notwithstanding, I appreciate the position of council and the district clerk, and I'm certainly prepared to support the 192 for a special assessment.
Very good. Further questions, commissioners? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that supporting the 192 units is a pretty easy call. There was the second ask that they talked about was waiving the fees. Is there a dollar amount that has? I haven't read it anywhere. Is there a dollar amount that they're asking to be waived?
This is John Myrtle. So the resolution I sent out earlier today and I have up there, this is based on the 214 number. So that's what you saw. just so the assessment that occurred, the supplemental assessment in July 2022, the total was $155,000. That was based on the 252 units. And that includes a credit for the hotel rooms previously. So if to reduce it to the 192 units, it would be the total assessment would be $56,131. And the way you arrive at that is 192 residential units multiplied by $1,655, which is a per dwelling unit charge. That gives you a total of $317,000. But there's a $261,000 credit for the prior existing hotel rooms, which would have been previously assessed. And that's per dwelling unit for a hotel room charge is $765 multiplied by 342 gives you the 261. So if BPW were to approve modifying the assessment down from its current state to the 192 units, it would go from $155,000 to $56,000. And so I know Commissioner Bush's question was about what Attorney Consoli had also requested was removing the 96 units that had been converted as by the prior owner. Again, it's been mentioned while it was a prior owner, there is no time limit on a supplemental assessment. But as we've explained, that plus the number of units, the fairness factor, so if you were to remove an additional 96 units from the 192, it would decrease that. I can give you a number.
Would it be zero, John?
It probably would be zero, yeah. The credit would be higher, right?
Credit would be higher than the amount due. I see Attorney Consoli smiling over there.
We'll take it.
We have history though in the past, we have, we've already done this in the past, so. We haven't done this in the past, sorry.
Yeah.
We haven't given up.
And I thank you. And I will tell you that in most cases, this being approved for 200, what, John, 55?
Yes.
Being approved as being able to construct 255 apartments. In most cases, we would recommend that you exercise your authority to assess based upon what can be built. Because of all the factors that Attorney Consoli brought out, because the assessor has changed the number from two, for some reason, it's rare that an assessor can override the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission, but they've reduced it to 214, give them the benefit of the doubt, give Attorney Consoli's client the benefit of the doubt that all they're going to do is build 192. That's their present intention. That's their long-term intention. All those factors came into, and the issue that Attorney Consoli brought out about the timing, all that were considered by John and I when we put this together for you, when we support the 192, and to do anything more, I think, is above and beyond what is reasonable.
Commissioner Payne.
Chairman, yeah, Commissioner Payne, I'd like to move this resolution to approve the modified supplement assessment of 50 Morgan Street, Hartford.
How many units? Oh, sorry,
It's
Commissioner.
got to be
You want to
amended.
specify?
Second,
For the 192 units?
No motion on there, on the floor. It's just, we went into a discussion. So
Hasn't been moved.
as I indicated, we had prepared two possible resolutions. You can do whatever you'd like, but two possible resolutions. One was at the 214 level, 214 units. The other one was 192 units. I believe the motion that you've made is for the 192. Is that correct, Commissioner? Thank you. That's the motion on the table.
Second.
Are we clear on that as the motion? And John, you're clear on that? Okay. So we do have the motion, and we do need a second,
Second.
and we had that. Yes, Commissioner Adel, sorry.
Commissioner Miguel, second.
Yes. And all in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye.
You had someone that wanted to discuss.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The only comment I wanted to add was,
Please.
shouldn't you
Mr. Drake.
file this with the assessor? It's gonna be 192. Something that's, I know,
It's going to be on the land.
you mean on the land record? Okay,
Yeah, it's going to be on the land record.
I'm good then.
You're good? We continue with the motion being passed, or we have another question? Okay.
I'd call the vote again, call for the vote again.
Yeah, voted again.
Call for the vote again.
Yeah. So Commissioner Payne made the motion, Commissioner Adel seconded the motion, and the detail was 192. Is that
Yes.
correct? That's the number. Okay.
Second option.
So now we can vote that again, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, it's unanimous. Do we have a second part, Attorney Stone, before you? Do we have a second part of that request? That's it. That takes care of,
If there's gonna be any additions, he's
Okay.
gonna come back and.
very good.
It's gonna go move to the board, the full board next.
Exactly.
But yes, future conversions would be subject to an additional supplemental assessment.
Part of the discussion we had here.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to item number 5. I'm sorry. Pardon me. Number 6, the Clean Water Project. So this is Scott's favorite.
Yes, thank you.
So fire away.
Great. I have a little presentation. Who's got the computer? Oh, nice. Look at that. So I'm just gonna run through this quickly because I know we got, Chris Stone used up 40 minutes of our meeting. So I'm just gonna run through this quickly. This is not so much to get into the details, just to give you some insight as to what we're doing, and more than happy to ask any questions. It's really just to provide you with information on what we're doing and how we're trying to get all this work done. So if I remember right, in your packet, I think Carrie and Julie, I think we provided everyone with a bunch of flyers. Does everybody have those?
Yep.
And these are really important. Remember what I said a while back? I said the MDC was on the integrated plan prior to April in our discussions with Deep. We were going to spend $47 million in North Hartford over the next 10 years, and now we spend 170, right? So there was a lot of work that we weren't planning to do in that 47 million. We weren't doing private property work. We weren't doing anything associated with laterals on private property. So all of this stuff that you see here, the backwater valve is pretty much the same as it always was. But a lot of work went into this stuff from the people behind you and their staff to really develop educational information. We've listened to our outreach teams. We listened to our commissioners, trying to simplify this very technical topic about the backwater valve program, the lateral program, all these programs that we have. So I'm not going to ask you to look through it tonight, but if you could look through it, if you have any questions, any comments, be happy to make adjustments. But as Chris mentioned, the reason why I have this plumbing code enforcement here is this is just another example of the challenges that we have at the MDC. So, and we've documented and we're trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page with, I use the example of the electric system in Love Lane. I use the example of Garden Street. There's properties that have obstacles in front of our MDC's abilities to implement some of our programs. And there's nothing we can do about it. On Garden Street, for example, one of the CRT housing, we couldn't solve the total problem, but we did provide them with upflow toilets. We did block some of their floor drains that were creating problems. But because the building is down below the road, because the building is slab on grade, there's no backwater valve, there's no way to put a backwater valve under the building. There's going to be limitations of what we can do. It's not 30% of the problem. It's not 20% of the problem, but there will be those occasions where we just can't help that person because of the nature and the way the building was built. We're going to document that with our outreach teams, document that with EPA and with DEEP, and ourselves and the board, and make sure that everybody understands when those occur, we're just keeping track of those kinds of scenarios. So that's all that plumbing code enforcement was about. The next item we've talked about, and I just want to clear the air, because we've talked about this a couple of times. Chris Stone talked about it at, I think, our August 4th meeting. The discussion about development in Hartford, we've got our NEPDES permit and we're trying to work through those issues with DEEP. I was on the phone with DEEP all this afternoon about, you know, their interpretation of what they gave us on the NEPDES permit, which says no new stormwater in existing CSO pipe. They realize that they need to soften that language, and they will, but it doesn't solve the problem that we're talking about, and this is it, right? So we talked with the city, and we talked about the fact that this ordinance here, and I don't know if you can see the red, but this ordinance, we were initially told that this is all about on-site storage of stormwater. So when you're building a building, you have to comply with a number of different requirements. The city's requirement, this is a standard engineering design requirement, DOT standard. Every town uses this in some way, fashion, this language. MS4 permits by DEEP require you to manage stormwater on site. General construction permits by DEEP require the same. City of Hartford initially said, "Oh, we got rid of that," right? Cal, you had mentioned that. We were told you got rid of it. We confirmed today they did not. They modified it, but they modified it in a way they removed the $3 a gallon for anything over the 100-year storm storage, and modified it in some other ways, but has nothing to do with modifying the on-site storage. So we're clear that the city has an ordinance. We don't have an ordinance. We want to create an ordinance. We need some input from DEEP. We're not there yet. And I've got a couple examples we always use Westbrook Village as an example. I got a couple other examples that we're working on right now. But the point is we're trying to find a solution to this. And we just need, in this short interim process of not having our own ordinance and this unknown circumstances as it relates to a specific new or existing development, we really need, on a case-by-case basis, we need DEEP to weigh in. So we are, and we're going to be doing that. So that's all you need to explain on that. This is just an example, and I think we've talked about this. This is Kenyon Street. So one of the properties that the city had told us about was they have this Kenyon property, and it's a blank slate. It's an open lot. There's no storm connections to it, so it's, quote, new in the sense of the NEPDES permit from DEEP. So the question is, how are they going to connect from Kenyon to Farmington? There's an existing CSO pipe there. So the question is to DEEP, well, it is truly a new scenario. So based on our NEPDES permit, can we connect a new scenario to an existing CSO pipe? Because our NEPDES permit says no. So in that conversation, they said, well, you've obviously we've got all these issues. I just talked about MS4 permits, general construction permits, on-site stormwater management. We're gonna do the same thing with CDM. We're gonna do a modeling analysis, a sewer modeling analysis, to see if this water from this new site's coming in is going to affect the storm system in any way. And then we also have an opportunity where there's a storm separated storm pipe that was built a couple of years ago that's about 300 feet away from this property. So in our normal ordinances, what we would say to the developer is, listen, by ordinance, we can't build that pipe for you because it's for you. And so we can't charge our customers to pay for an infrastructure specific to serve the purposes of the developer, right? But there may be an opportunity where if we are going to extend that storm pipe in the future under a separate future separation project, then maybe we can share in the costs associated with that extension of that 300 feet. So we have, the good news is for Hartford commissioners, I know it's important, there's a solution here somewhere, but it's not going to be a problem. We just got to figure it out, right? So we're going to be working with DEEP and working with the developer on that to figure out what's the way to handle that. The other issue is and we've been talking about this a lot. This is a big development, and this is a really, Bushnell South is an opportunity for, it's not a development opportunity, it's an opportunity to solve a long-standing problem. And the long-standing problem is Pulaski Circle floods. And what's happening is all of this area in blue right now is parking lot. And that water flows. If you go to here, I'm trying to find myself, Capitol Avenue here, right? Capitol Avenue here is a state office building, the Taj Mahal State Office building now. I used to work there for 20, right? Marble, Billy and I were there.
That's Capitol.
This Capitol. So all of this water that comes off these parking lots, there's not a lot of catch basins. There's not one catch basin on West Street that goes all the way to Elm. There's not one catch basin. So a lot of this water that hits these parking lots, the parking lot at the Crown in the middle is probably 5-6 feet above Buckingham and above Capitol. So the water just runs right off, and it's going in all different directions. So our system is absorbing it from different locations. But when you build a building on it, now you're going to funnel all of that water into one pipe on one street. And that's where the concern we have. And that's why those peak flows, the slide before, the 10-year, 20-year, 25-year, 50, 100-year storm, we want to make sure that storm water doesn't hit that pipe at a peak flow. So we got to slow it down. We got to store it on site and slowly release it. The challenge with this development is we did the analysis for CDM, and it doesn't, we always talk about 10-year storm. It doesn't impact the 10-year storm, which is a good thing. But what's happening is all the storm water doesn't get collected on site, so it runs down these side streets, Hudson, West, Clinton, and Capitol, and it collects at the Pulaski Circle. But the Pulaski Circle in this location is all separated storm pipe that is owned by DOT and is draining that stormwater into not our sewer system, which is good, into the Park River conduit, which is good. But when you build a building, you're going to collect it all. And so now what happens is our overflow, which is right about here, that goes to the river. Now you're basically going to increase the overflow, the CSO, on an annual basis from 700,000 gallons a year to 1.4 million. So the question to Deep is, okay, well, we've got an existing site. It's not new. We're going to connect to an existing CSO. That's okay. It doesn't solve a problem. It doesn't create a problem for surcharging the neighborhood, but it does affect the CSO. What do we do, Deep? So that's in their ball of court, and they need to kind of help us understand that. But what we have been talking about, and I have a meeting with DOT and Bushnell South developers, and Commissioner Stuber is coming to that meeting, is I found out from Commissioner Mandyke that DOT has this plan to bring a bridge over the river and through the woods and drop it off onto Route Pulaski Circle, Whitehead Highway, and I said, what are you talking about? Nobody knew about it. Commissioner Mandyke did. We didn't know anything about it. So, and I don't think the city did. So we're engaging DOT on this because the goal would be, if you have to build on-site storage because of city ordinance, our ordinance, standard engineering practice, does it make sense to build and spend money on on-site storage if the DOT is going to be doing something here that we could possibly connect to? So the DOT increases the capacity. Maybe the developer brings their pipe to some location. Maybe the MDC shares that cost because there's an embedment in some future development of separation up through to the hospital. So there's opportunities here. And so we'll be working through those issues. But the good news is for Bushnell South, we're going to be okay. But we got to work out some details. We got to work out the details. Okay. Exactly.
Scott, let me ask you
Yes.
a question before you get it.
Yep.
Where is the garage dump that
state of Connecticut is dumping into our sewer.
Yeah, so this is the
That's the
165
garage.
Capitol. The garage is right here,
Okay.
right here?
it's Washington.
No.
Buckingham, Washington.
Yeah, Buckingham, right here.
No, it's in Washington Street?
No, Buckingham's right here. The
No,
garage
no,
is right here.
Yeah. It's on the
And,
corner.
am I correct? See?
Okay.
There's another new garage on Capitol Avenue.
Yes, that's over here. That's right, here. Yep. And so that's existing, right? But yes, you're right, Commissioner. That is a new garage right here. Paying the butt to park in.
That's the question I'm asking. Wasn't the Capitol, isn't that that's dumping into the sewer on Capitol Avenue, into MDC
Yes,
sewer, right?
yes, yep.
At which time, instead of them coming down to the conduit, as they should have done, as a capital cost, they just dumped it into our sewer.
So one of the concessions that Deep's gonna ask for with us in the city
Is
is
there a lawsuit?
yes. No, but one of the considerations is gonna be, listen, if you can do something over here really good, then maybe we can let you violate something over here, give you credit, like bank some credits. The problem here is, this is the opportunity. If we don't take this opportunity this is a win, because we're gonna solve the flooding, the traditional flooding on Pulaski Circle. The system's not large enough. We have a CSO that's going over at like a 3-month storm, and we're supposed to get it to a 1-year storm. And if we add, we're gonna be worse, right? We're going backwards. But if we can solve this problem with our CSO and get credit for it, then when there's an area within the city that there's nothing we can do, you're just gonna have to let us use Kensington, Kenyon as an example.
Aren't we trying to sue the city, state in this? We don't.
What?
There's a lawsuit that we're
Well, it's
pursuing.
No, that's
Talking about the
here.
garage.
Yeah, this
State-
here.
It's a claims commissioner action, yes.
Yeah, but that's got nothing to do with this.
Okay.
Yeah, this is where they agreed to pay for, during construction, they agreed to pay for the groundwater as part of dewatering for construction activity. And they wanted to keep the dewatering system because they wanted to go down one extra level for a garage. And we said, okay, as long as you pay the 13 cents a gallon. And they said, okay, and they paid all during construction. They paid for about 6 or 8 months of when the state took over. And then they said, no, we're not paying anymore. It's too much money. So that's what.
Yeah, the other option was to build.
Yeah, the other option was to do exactly what we've been talking about. Bring a storm pipe right down Clinton Street, which is here. Right?
So this is still pending.
Here, and then connect to here's the pump station right here. Yeah.
So what we have here is we have a potential lawsuit that's pending before the claims commissioner.
Right.
We have not been approved on that. We've been approved on one other, which is the landfill.
Yep, correct.
And that's a pretty good, what's that, about $600,000 a year or
It's
something?
about
Or is it 300?
no, it's about
Oh, it's 900, isn't it?
no. It's I think I don't know. I want to say the number was like $50,000 a month.
I think they're also discharging less now, I think.
Yeah, they are less, but it was during construction activity. It was about $50,000 a month, and now it's something less.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, excuse me. Yes, Commissioner Van Dyke to Mr. Jellison, please. Scott, is this one of our slides or is this a slide that we were given?
It's got our logo in the corner.
Yeah,
It would just be interesting if we could just color code the existing buildings that are going to remain in there versus brand new development that's on there. So the 2 buildings on Trinity Street, the old AG's office, those are existing buildings that are already there.
You're talking about 55 Elm Street.
Yep, that's existing buildings. It would just be helpful to color code what is existing, because it's not like we're building new buildings there, but they're conversions into residential versus office. The other thing too is, if I'm not mistaken, on Buckingham, have we separated on Buckingham?
No, there is some portion up here that's
Oh,
separated.
that's Capital. That's Capital.
Sorry, Buckingham
Down
here.
here, but we did separate.
There's a small piece there, but the majority of it is not.
Okay, so we don't have any separation on Capital, Buckingham, or Elm.
Buckingham, we do have some.
There's just a small piece.
It from Main Street
But
down.
just remember this.
Just curious.
Just remember this, and I've said this to Deep, and we've said this to the city. Remember our goal.
Yeah.
Our goal, like we're doing in North Hartford, our goal is to never build another tunnel, but use separation. So it's a timing thing, right? We might not get to doing separation up Hudson for 10, 15 years, but the goal is eventually we will, through separation projects, we will have stormwater pipes that people can connect directly to, just like we're doing in North Hartford. So the ultimate goal will be, there will be the infrastructure available for development to connect to. So we've got to find, that transition to, as you know, we're spending $170 million in North Hartford, and we're not spending anything else in the city of Hartford because we can't afford it, because otherwise the rates would go up. So we've got to, pick our battles here when it comes to trying to deal with things like this that are, coming at the same time as North Hartford projects.
And Mr. Chair, just one last thing. I think it's important to note that the Pulaski Circle project is part of the Greater Hartford Mobility Study that DOT is doing. And that Greater Hartford Mobility Study has early implementer projects, and Pulaski Circle is on one of those early implementer projects. So this is something that could happen within the next 3 to 5 years, which really, I think, MDC to focus and partner with other people who are doing infrastructure is just very, very smart of us. It saves us money, it saves them money, and we're not in the road 2 to 3 times. So I think projects like this are very important to look at and make sure we're maximizing the assets that are in the money that's being thrown at these projects to make them successful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Discussion with DOT.
Yeah, that's we need to have a much tougher discussion with DOT on some of these project areas. That's a whole nother topic. And again, this is just the hydraulic issues that we just got done talking about with that project. Again, these are just the ordinances that are restricting us from paying for. One of the discussions was, well, why doesn't the MDC just pay for the improvements so that the developer doesn't have to put on-site storage for stormwater? And this is the point. We cannot charge. Let's just say, pick a number. Let's just say there's $10 million worth of on-site storage necessary to accommodate this development. The discussion has been around, well, why doesn't the MDC just improve the system so that the developer doesn't have to do that? Well, what would happen is, whatever that cost is, we would have to charge everyone to pay for it. So that means, and that's against our ordinances. So we can't do that either. And then this is just an update. So I meet with about 30 staff in this room every Wednesday. And, we're back to the throes of 2008 to 2013. We're doing lots of separation work. We're doing lots of projects. We got a lot of people involved on the MDC level, at the city level. There's a lot of moving parts. So we get together and we meet and we do what we call a 2-week look ahead. And this identifies all the project areas and identifies what's happening in these next 2 weeks. I've asked Nick to put this on our website. This is going to be updated on a regular basis. I think I've said this before, but I think it's important to say everything that the MDC committed to do, we did, right? We said we'd be out in Durham Street digging in July. We were. We've complied with, for the first time, it was our MDC's idea to implement and impose on ourselves the 30% workforce requirement from Hartford. We've never done that before. Deep's never approved it before. And we are meeting those goals. And our contractors have a commitment that they will meet those 30% goals with their projects. So we're going to make sure that the commissioners get a copy of this. Our outreach teams get a copy of this. Everybody knows what's happening on a real-time basis in those projects. Nick is actually developing a website so that when you click on whatever it is, outreach, you click on Durham Street, you'll have some bullets and some updates on that project right on the front page of our website, but it'll bring you to more detail by project area. So, and we're making sure that Janice and Crane, our outreach teams, are as educated on what we're doing real time as we are, because they're the ones. I was on the phone multiple times today just on the issues that happened, the issue that happened on Lyman, and so we need our outreach teams to really understand what's happening and what the facts are, so that they can help us communicate that within the community. So again, these are just updates. I'm not going to go through them. Just that our commitment was. I'm not sure, Commissioner Torres. I think you asked for, or someone asked for, areas of prone reoccurring flooding. This is that map, and we've provided this to the city, and we use this as a tool. And then again, these are just Durham Street. This is the water main work that's in preparation for the sewer separation work. Again, private property work, really trying to hone in on. It's really important for us to be consistent, explaining to the public that we can't solve street flooding, but we can solve making sure that sewer's not coming into your home. And the program, I'm going to get to that in a minute. And I'm going to so these are just bullets on what we're doing. A lot of recommendations on notification and notifications and papers. It was recommended by Janice that there were 3 papers, local papers, that we make sure that we put all these flyers in. We did. Nick did that. We're actually going to make sure that procurement, anything that we procure, we had a problem. We had an RFP invite pre-bid meeting for the lateral work. We got about 10 or so people to come in for the first meeting. No Hartford-based contractors. And I know of one that I've dealt with in the past, and I asked Jeff King, Jeff, where is he? He's been at a couple of our meetings here, and yet he didn't show up. So he did show up at the second pre-bid, but we only got 1 out of 21. So that's not good enough, right? So we've got to find a way to make sure that we reach out. So our outreach teams, Jeff King, our procurement team is being aggressive, trying to make sure that we're recruiting and communicating in the right locations to get those people to apply to these jobs. And then I just want to, we've had a couple of meetings. So the first meeting, this is the comptroller's $5 million flood plan that was approved by the legislature. So I think I mentioned at one of our meetings, we've had a first meeting, the chairman, myself, flood reimbursement, myself, Chris Stone, we met and talked about the program. This is the comptroller's process. That's just what they gave us. And we've had a second meeting to kind of fine tune the details, but long and short of it is the comptroller is in full control of this program. We're not. We're making sure our outreach teams are making it very clear that you don't come to the MDC to follow this process. Step one is you go to the comptroller's office. Blue Hill Civic was hired under legislation by the comptroller to help communicate and educate and help people fill out the applications. The application is not yet done yet. It's supposed to be ready by September 1st. So comptroller is a little behind. They're getting bombarded. We are starting to hand this flyer out now. When we go out in the middle of the night, we give them out the flyer. Our outreach teams are giving out the flyers. But we only get involved between step 6 and step 7. And what we have said is we are going to hire, and Jeff has done a great job finding some contractors. We're looking for our recommendation to the comptroller was the legislation said we had to hire we had inside inspectors that would do this work. Well, we actually don't. We don't have our people that do this work. Whenever we have a claim that we're responsible for, our Lewis Owens, he's our claims person. He goes out and he hires contractors, and they give us pricing to fix stuff. So that's how we handle
those claims. But what is needed here is you need somebody who's qualified, licensed with the state. I recommended that we use the Department of Consumer Protection, hire someone who's a billing official that is qualified to actually make a determination for cause that there was in fact flooding on this property, whether it was backup from MDC, whether it was just flooding from the surroundings, that it was in fact flooding. We are going to procure those individuals ourselves, and there's going to be a step 6A and B. And what this says here is that the DPC licensed inspector you hire, so DPC comptroller is allowing a homeowner to hire their own inspector as long as they're licensed. Or you can go through the MDC. We already started getting requests today, over the last couple of days. It's up to you. If they want to use their own licensed inspector and the comptroller approves it, that's fine. We will have people on staff that we can use. It will be rolled into our claims process. We're going to be providing the comptroller's office with everything that we collect. So if we're out in a house in the middle of the night because of a storm and we've done some determinations that it wasn't our responsibility or it was, Kelly's group through Treasury Claims is going to be notifying and keeping track of that information through the comptroller's office. So they will know what we know and we will know what they know. But it will all be the determination of Dr. Rule is going to decide whether or not this is a legitimate claim and whether or not whatever the dollar amount is. Comptroller is also RFPing for a claims adjuster, so they're going to hire someone like Travelers or Aetna, whoever that might be, and they'll be the ones to actually determine the actual costs. We won't be involved in that. So the only thing MDC will be doing is be providing an inspector, coordinating with our command center, utility services, and Treasury to make sure that we have verified that this truly was a home or business affected by flooding.
And all of that's reimbursable.
And yes, and the claims, the inspector that we hire will be reimbursable to us. Now, the one thing I have said to the comptroller's office, and it's already happened, there's a lot of, you've seen the papers, there's a lot going on here. The concern we have is this program hasn't even gotten started. And there's probably, I know of 3 claims that are probably going to eat up the first $5 million. So I don't know how they're going to handle that, but it's going to be an issue. But it's not our issue. All we're doing is providing this flyer, making the customers aware. The comptroller has a program. Please call them, schedule the application. You want to do the application, you need help, you go see Blue Hill Civic. Our outreach teams are very aware of what's going on. Janice Fleming has come to the meetings with us, so she's fully aware of what's happening and making sure that we are at arm's length with this comptroller program. It's not our program. It has nothing to do with our $170 million project. It's just outside, in addition to help and support the community. And I think Commissioner Torres has a question.
Yes, of course. Commissioner Torres.
Now, I understand that, we're trying to keep a distance from this, but we all know what's going to happen when something hits the fan. And that is that the MDC is a low-hanging fruit, and people are going to come and gravitate and blame us for whatever the controller does or doesn't do. Right. 2 issues have been brought to my attention regarding this, because eventually it all comes back to us, because we're here. One is that of that $5 million, and I don't know what the statute says regarding any administrative costs that will be taken out of that $5 million and to whom that money would go to. That's one issue. And the second issue is that the process by which a person or an owner, a property owner, would apply for these funds, which at this time I believe the draft is about 13 pages long. So those are important issues. Although they're not our issues, they are our issues because those are our customers, and our clients. And eventually, we wind up again, responding to these complaints, not the state. The state is insulated from all this stuff, because you can never get anybody over there to give you a straight answer anyway.
One day a week in the office.
But
And if I may-
I just need to raise that issue because I think we need to be cognizant of and be careful and start, and make sure that we try to address these things before they become an issue.
And if I may, to that, so Commissioner, I agree 100% with you, because my biggest concern is being dragged into this, this issue. So that's why I've had, Janice Fleming and Crane have gone to 2 Saturday meetings. They actually met with Dr. Rule, last Saturday, I think, and there was a meeting, with Mr. Harris the week before. So we have our outreach team as part of that. Janice and Crane had actually met with Blue Hills yesterday to make sure that everybody understands who's doing what. We've asked the comptroller's office to have a meeting with all of us together, Blue Hills Civic, our community outreach teams, so that we all agree on whose responsibility is to do what. And we haven't had that meeting yet, but we will. But I agree 100%. We are fully engaged in this.
Yes, further comments? Yes.
Scott, the meeting on Saturday was with the 5th District Town Committee meeting where we asked Dr. Root to come to that meeting. And at that meeting, when I read the legislation again, his salary comes from the $5 million. The Blue Hill Civic Association payment comes from the $5 million. Whomever the inspectors get. So at that meeting, I asked him, well, exactly how much money is going to be going into the neighborhoods, and he was unable to tell us. And like you said, MDC is going to get blamed for all of this. And also at that meeting, one of the things that came out of it was, and Vicky from Blue Hills was there. The neighborhood folks was at this meeting. It was well attended by neighborhood folks. One of the things that came out of it was that for a person who lived on Barber Street, Tower Avenue, or anywhere in that neighborhood, if they will need to take 2 buses to get from their home to get up to 1229 Albany Avenue, if the line is out the door, the transfer expires in 2 hours. So they need another bus fare to get back. So that was a problem. And at that meeting, the Captain Harris did ask, will an office, satellite office, whatever, 3 hours a week or whatever it is, be there to help homeowners?
Yes. And I've talked to Janice about this over the last couple of weeks. So as I reported to you, and it's true, I won't say who, but we did have good insight from someone in the community that said they didn't think that we needed an office. And we talked about that at one of our last meetings, I think it was the August meeting. And Janice had called me and told me that, what Captain Harris had mentioned and the fact that, he felt and the community felt that we really, and my point was, I don't care. I'm happy to do that because we've done that in the past. I just was trying to follow, a guideline from the community that I trusted the information. So we're fully supportive of putting something in. I've asked Janice to work with Captain Harris on where that is, if it's Barber Street or somewhere else. But I've also asked, and this was prior to the Barber Street issue, when we talked about opening up some offices. I've asked Nick, we're going to work with the community centers, and how many of those are? 3. There's some churches. Janice mentioned there was a church or 2 that we could do this. We'd like to rent space from those community outreach buildings, and we're going to put in some monitors, and we're going to, we talked to, you've seen those videos that we use, the 1-minute cartoon videos. We're going to put together a series of those videos and just let those play, and we'll have our information with our backwater valves. We'll do something like, might have somebody there, 2-3 days a week for an hour or whatever, and there'll be times that you can set up an appointment with us, And if we pick a location like on Barber Street, we might do 2 or 3 days a week, 2 hours, or whatever makes sense. But we agree that if that's what the community thinks they need, then we're willing to do it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Any further? I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Payne here. Scott, through the chairman, the lateral program that you have going on right now, is that open to all districts, and is it for residential and commercial, or is there any restrictions?
So it is open to all of our towns, and we do have some requests. John, what does it say about commercial?
Pulling it up. I don't think it's limited to residential only.
Okay. It's everybody. Yeah, it's everybody. The one thing that, this is another item for.
It's all 100
I have another question.
100,000 customers.
Right. There's something that's not, it's not on the agenda, but it's the part of the lateral program. You may have remembered at one of the DPW meetings a while ago, we were talking prior to all this, we were talking about the city of West Hartford was planning to do a bunch of stormwater management projects, and we were going to coordinate. A lot of our projects were coordinating with theirs. So our clean water project and their stormwater project. And we drafted a MOU, which we never exercised and we never have brought to the board. And the concept was to incentivize a town to build a storm system in their town, the concept was if the town builds the storm system, we would provide a storm lateral to that new town-owned storm system. And the concept was if we get the stormwater out of that house and it's not coming to Hartford and we don't have to have backwater valves and we don't have to have sump pumps, then we solve a lot of problems for ourselves. But we haven't gotten there yet, and we've had a lot of questions from West Hartford as to whether or not the stormwater lateral that was originally intended under the MOU would be free as part of this program. The answer is no. The answer is the lateral is for your sewer, a new sewer lateral, but we need BPW and the full board to decide whether or not we're going to move forward. I think it's a great idea because I think all of our towns that don't have storm systems, it's an incentive for our towns to build storm systems. And if we spend $10,000 on a lateral for a storm pipe versus dealing with backwater valves and sump pumps forever, getting into homes, there's a benefit to the MDC. But it's a bigger topic. We need to bring it to the BPW and the full board. We're just a little busy right now, but we'll get there. But it's something we got to bring.
One more question, if I could, Mr. Chairman, through you. This flooding that's going on, Hartford's not the only town city that's getting flooding issues. We have flooding in West Hartford, we have flooding in Wethersfield, we have flooding in Newington, and possibly other towns. My question to you is, how are the other flooding cases in the other surrounding towns treated when there's a problem, or how's that working? Because it seems like this is all about Hartford, and how is the other towns getting treated for the flooding issues that they have?
So as it relates to the MDC, we treat everybody the same. So if you have a sewer backup in your home, and it's, the 3 categories: act of God, collapse, water main break, or it's negligence, we treat everybody the same. There's no difference. The issue about these extra programs that the state has implemented, it obviously it's not for anybody but Hartford. If it's, and we have no control over that, and there's going to be more money. And from what we've been told, Chairman and myself and Chris, that there's going to be more money allocated toward this. There's a bunch of articles in the paper today about, the EPA's involved, and they're complaining about, people can't get any of the $5 million unless they pay their taxes or they pay their parking tickets. So there's a lot going on here, but we treat everybody the same.
Thank you.
there aren't.
Mr. Chairman.
But again, the stormwater issue in all the other towns is a town's problem. That's what, Rocky Hill, I got a letter from the manager. I don't know if you were copied on it, Scott.
I didn't see it.
That they sent us the flooding that has happened in 3 situations in Rocky Hill. That's a stormwater problem that isn't MDC's problem. That's the town because they're separated. They're separated in their situation. So any of the towns other than Hartford that it happens is their responsibility. West Hartford, it's their responsibility, not MDC's. Same thing in the other towns.
And Hartford's not responsible for their storm drainage?
We own most of the storm system.
We own most of the storm
Yeah,
system.
under
It's
the
separated,
under the
it's not a
charter.
separated system.
I think your question went to what happens if there's a backup to someone's basement, how are they treated?
Backups.
Everyone's treated the same.
The same way, yeah. I thought you were
Everybody's
talking
treated
about, you said there was flooding.
There is, and I wanted to make sure everybody was treated equally,
Yes.
each town, and it is.
Yes, it is.
Answers my question.
I'm saying that I just picked it up a day or so ago, and I meant to call you on it. Town manager he sent several pictures to us about the flooding on Silestein Highway and Rocky Hill. And it was substantial. And again, it was overwhelmed their stormwater system. That's not a responsibility of MDC's. Or if it happened in Newington, or if it happened in Weathersfield. Those are situations that's your stormwater system in the suburban towns. It's different than Hartford.
Just to cover a point there, but in Hartford, if the development puts too much water into the streets without retaining a zero runoff, then it's adding to the problem. Every town that does development, Rocky Hill, Newington, all the towns follow the zero runoff. And Hartford should be following the same thing, shouldn't they?
A couple of things happen in Hartford that don't happen anyplace else. The West Hartford sewage comes through Hartford. And when you put too much water, stormwater into our combined sewer, it backs up Hartford's system. That's what's happening right now, which most of the flooding is that we're getting in Hartford.
So it's West Hartford's fault?
On a dry day, we don't get that. So it's coming from stormwater that is not supposed to be in a sanitary sewer.
So there's two, I mean, you got 2 issues here, right? There's a lot of issues, but the fact is, by city ordinance, by DOT standards, by deep EPA standards, by deep standards, the on-site storage of stormwater is a requirement. But the issue regarding who's flooding who, like, is West Hartford flooding itself? Yes, right? Is Newington flooding itself? Yes. Is Newington, Weathersfield, and West Hartford contributing to flooding Hartford? Yes. But the point is, and that's what I've said this before, and I really believe it's the only solution, is the MDC has got to bite the bullet and develop a stormwater authority. That's the way to solve this problem. You're not going to solve the problem, but if we don't do it together, and you don't do it as 8 towns, what's going to happen is EPA is going to knock on West Hartford's door and say, MS4, what are you doing about it? Yep, here's a consent decree. Start spending some money. Then they're going to go to Newington. Then they're going to go to Weathersfield. And then they're going to come to Hartford. And Hartford has a responsibility when it comes to localized street flooding. We always talk about the fact that, we don't have the ability right now under ordinances to expand the storm system to accommodate a 200-year storm. So you talk about the flood control system for the city of Hartford. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but if we go in front of EPA and we go in front of DEEP as 8 towns, they won't be picking on each individual town. They'll be looking at it just like we're doing in the Clean Water Project. We'll be able to prioritize as a regional body, rather than West Hartford fighting their own battle. If the towns have to fight their own battles with DEEP and EPA, it's going to be terrible. And we're better off as a regional body to be able to sit down with these regulators and say, listen, we're not going to get to the projects over here because it's an affordability issue, and we're going to focus on these projects, and they agree, and we say, okay, let's move forward. But if we start to, our towns have to fight these battles individually, and it's coming. It's coming. One thing I could say, which is good about what's happened, is the recognition that stormwater is the cause, is the problem. And it also highlights the fact that we've been screaming at the top of our lungs at MDC in front of EPA and DEEP for years, is that the towns that are discharging their stormwater into our sewer system is a problem. And that's why we're spending all this money. But in the same token, City of Hartford has a responsibility as well. Clean your streets, make sure, I saw, I was on vacation a couple weeks ago, and there was a big storm coming in through California, and the mayor from Palm Springs or whatever it was, and she said, there's not much we can do except clean the catch basins. And it's a simple thing. It's a simple thing. Was it Los Angeles? So everybody's got a role here, our 8 towns in the MDC, but I really think now's the time to
Yeah, I'm gonna exercise some discretion and ask for the last comment due to time, because we have another meeting that is now late, very late. So Commissioner,
Just a point.
Chairman DeBella.
Was it 3 or 4 years ago? We went to the legislature with this concept. Remember, Scott, when we went in there? And they knocked it down. Like we were trying to take something over. We were trying to talk about a regional storm system. It was discarded in the process.
So, thank you, Chairman. So with that in mind, I want to cut the discussion off because not only the time, but stormwater is going to recur in every committee meeting that we have, constantly. And I'm not saying it's in a bad way. So it is an ongoing discussion. And I know that there might still be some questions, but in terms of fairness, we do need to move on. And I want to move to the public comment portion. If there are any public comments, now if we could entertain those. Seeing none, hearing none, nobody on the phone from, okay. So with that, I'll move on to asking commissioners to introduce anything that they wish to going forward for the next agenda. And hearing none.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry, it's Commissioner Bush.
I think that this is the appropriate time and place to bring it up, but I'm just if it's for a future meeting. At the last meeting, which I was not able to attend, a resident of West Hartford who had suffered catastrophic failure of their sewer lateral submitted some testimony. I didn't see any resolution to that, but I would like to, at a future meeting, address that and ask that this body look at a possible reimbursement to that particular client, client customer of the MDC. It was a fairly unique situation. I don't believe that there's a lot of other people who could make the same claim. We do have the exact program currently that just passed that would have given her $10,000 towards that repair. So if we could bring that up at a future meeting, I would appreciate it.
Familiar with that item, so we'll put that on the next agenda.
Sure. Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bush. Looking for the
We adjourn.
appropriate motion. Thank you.
Second.
So moved.